Save the Semantics, episode 346. It is October 7th, 2025. My name is Myro. This is the podcast where I ramble on for a bit about some shit. Recording this on a Tuesday afternoon / evening. The NBA preseason has begun as of this past weekend. So I was able to catch, some portions of those games, was able to watch a good chunk of the Warriors game. So we're kind of almost back in the full swing of things. I think there are like a handful of teams that haven't yet played a preseason game yet, but it feels like a good number. More than half of the teams have participated in some form of preseason. So that's pretty exciting. I am looking forward to kind of the rest of the slate for this upcoming week. Again, there's really only so much you can kind of grasp from preseason, you know what I mean? Maybe it sort of solidifies the rotation a bit more. Maybe there are some schemes and stuff, some things that you might be able to glean, but outside of it, outside of the actual basketball being played, I think there's not like a ton to necessarily take away, right? Like you could have someone go off for 30, 40 points, some, third stringer, because they played more than half the game, and they were playing against some other team's third stringers, and, they end up not really being any impactful player whatsoever during the regular season. So there are just so many instances. I mean, there was earlier or last season, the Warriors had a game where I think it was Lindy Waters hitting the game winner in a preseason game. And that was fun. That was a lot of fun to watch. But, he had some moments here and there. I think when Steve Kerr was trying to figure out what to do with his rotation, he had moments where I think he started at some points, but outside of that, he really was kind of a non-factor during the regular season. So you're gonna have these moments, where certain players might pop off when they're really not going to be doing much else during the regular season. But it's still fun to watch. You know what I mean? It's kind of like you watch to hope for this potential of a player, whether it's like a rookie or like an undrafted player, and see how well they might contribute. Just sort of envisioning a future in which they might actually be a significant rotational player. But I think in most instances, it's good to just kind of keep your expectations in check, and just kind of view these as kind of exhibition games, right? I do think that you can maybe sort of glean, just like the fitness, how well how well players are, adjusted physically to a game, to the game and that kind of thing. But yeah, there's really not a ton just historically to really take away from preseason, as in a similar case to summer league as well, right? Summer league even less so, because it's all rookies and sophomores and just younger players for the most part. So the Warriors game yesterday, was it yesterday or this past weekend? I think it was on Sunday. Warriors played the Lakers for their first preseason game. It was a lot of fun. I mean, getting to kind of see the newest additions and Horford, and really mainly Horford, like everybody else, was kind of carried forward from last season. But just seeing how well Horford fits on the floor, I was a little kind of I don't know, I was kind of questioning the lineup choice. The fact that we have an actual center now and Steve Kerr still plays freaking Draymond at the 5 is so funny to me. We're still running the small ball 5, even though we have a decent center rotation with Horford, Post, maybe Trace Jackson Davis if they really need to. kind of break the glass, but like it's just like he just cannot let that small ball five lineup go. It's just so funny to me. My hope is that that's not what the rotation is going to look like. I think Moody had a really nice game. I actually kind of missed some of the highlights he had in the first half, but he went off. Like apparently he had like a really nice shooting stroke and everything. So that seemed to be something maybe that could might be able to be carried into the start of the regular season. Steph looked like he's just ready to go. But yeah, I think the thing that I think that I can really, I don't know, maybe, talk about is, what it's going to look like. What is the rotation going to look like based on what we saw from one preseason game, right? There's not a lot to really take away, but I'll try my best to kind of piece together what we can see. Let's start off with Kuminga, because I think that was really the kind of the elephant in the room, the biggest question mark going into this. Now that he's sort of signed a contract, is he going to actually be able to provide meaningful minutes? Like I was pretty pessimistic in the last time I talked about the Warriors, after they finally signed him to a contract, where I was like, it feels like it's going to be a really hard balancing act of trying to get Kuminga minutes, but also like trying to kind of sell him to a potential suitor during the regular season. It's like, who is going to pick him up? Like, what team is out there that is willing to take a chance on him if he's not going to play under, Steve Kerr's system? And I was like, I just don't, this feels like it might be a bit of a tricky situation. I just don't know how they're going to try to sell him to other teams in the league. And he played well. I think he played really well in this preseason game. Like he really, it felt like he kind of, again, preseason, what can you really take away from it? But he did play to his role. Like he didn't force any shots. I don't think, he didn't really take any like bad shots either. Right, he used his athleticism to his advantage when driving to the basket, getting a foul called, and moving the ball around when needed to, instead of holding on to it for way too long and letting the possession just kind of die out. I felt like he did everything right, just watching, and I think a lot of other people, I'm sure, were just watching him with just kind of like an eagle eye, just being like, all right, we're just putting him under kind of a microscope. But I do think he performed well, and my hope, I just want the best for the team, and if he's able to play and showcase some of that prowess and again use his athleticism to his advantage, and essentially kind of do the Jimmy Butler things when he's off the floor, drawing fouls and getting to the basket and all that kind of stuff. You could make it work. Like he averaged 15 a game last season, and if he's able to be a potential and significant bench threat, where he just kind of feasts on maybe some of the lesser bench players of other teams, like you could see that working out well in the team's favor. It's just kind of, it's like we're kind of trying to buy into this, every year. And the hope is that maybe because of this contract, maybe because he is on, he has a contract, he's paid, is this going to be enough to motivate him to actually perform to what the team needs, kind of in a similar manner to Jimmy getting paid, and he finally got paid, so now he's going to perform to the highest of his ability, when in Miami he wasn't getting the money he wanted, and he did his old shenanigans, right? Of course there are things that I talked about that being just kind of a disaster. It worked out for him, right? And maybe it'll work out for Kuminga as well. Like, Kuminga didn't do anything like, just, this was more of an agent issue, like his agent, as opposed to him individually, like doing shenanigans off the court or on the court or anything like that, right? It was more so like a fit, and then also the agent and the Warriors kind of having a stalemate. So my optimism leads me to believe and hope that they can make it work, that he can kind of make it work, and he can be a contributor. He now is under contract. He knows his role, and he knows what he needs to do for the team, and he's not going to play more than what is expected of him. Like, unless like a thing where Steph goes out and he needs to be slotted in to be, kind of, add more on the scoring portion of it, right? So that's kind of my optimism kind of bleeding through a little bit, despite this barrier I have of kind of like wanting to like buy in. I just want the best for this team. And if they can make it work, if he is willing to like actually buy in this time and to work within the system to his strengths, like, I think that will be the best situation. And then in that case, like, if he is performing well, like, then you could pivot and trade him to a team that has players that maybe fit better within this current timeline and this current year of, going for, playoff championship contention, right? Like, if they feel like there is like a ceiling with Kuminga on this team, and they feel like they can pivot and get a vet player that works better, they could do that. So it's a win-win if he plays well. So that's just kind of the thing, right? Like, other teams might see that. It's like, oh, okay, if he is willing to buy into a system, he might work well in other teams' system as well. I'm being very optimistic, but I mean, that's just kind of, what do you like? That's just kind of the case for being a sports fan. It's just being optimistic about your team, even though sometimes it feels, despite all of despite past history or whatever, there might be reasons to remain skeptical. But I want to be hopeful for this. Like, this is going to be the last year. Really, it feels like this is going to be the last year that they can really make a move with kind of Steph here. I mean, it's like maybe one more year, but Jimmy's contract comes over. It comes up after this year, and I don't know what his next move is going to be, but it feels like this is kind of like the last all-in move for this team. But yeah, so Warriors first preseason, pretty good. I also liked, some of the other activity from the players. There's some really nice ball movement from the second and third units of the team. Really kind of just like completely just, everybody is just sort of like just embodying this system of just like strength and numbers, all this type of stuff, you know what I mean? And I really like that. I thought that was just like, you had someone like Will Richards. He had like a few moments here and there. He didn't play like a significant amount of time, but you could see him like, oh, he's like they drafted him for fit, right? Like, that's exactly what they got him for. And I think he's going to probably work well. I don't know how many minutes he's going to get on this team, but and this year, but that it's another option. It's another kind of wing player, high IQ kind of wing player that's maybe slots into like a Moody role or like a Melton role or whatever, right? So they have options there, it feels like. But yeah, so I'm feeling, again, it's one game, one preseason game. So I can't, what can you really take away? Not a lot, but I'm feeling, it was just good to watch some basketball too. You know what I mean? It was good to watch some Warriors basketball. As for the other preseason games, there's not really too much to take away. I've just kind of been watching some things here and there. Maybe I'll just kind of have it in the background while I'm doing other stuff. There's some other some other games going on today and tomorrow and this week. So I'm excited. Just more basketball. You know what I mean? I know it's not going to be all the quality, but it's still something, man. I'm really excited to watch, just get a glimpse of any of that. There's a lot of sports stuff going on right now. So right now, it's always around this time that I kind of forget like that it's also the MLB, so Major League Baseball playoffs as well. And then, you got the NFL going on kind of in full swing. So sports-wise, fall is always kind of a very strong time of year for all of these sports to kind of come in all together, right? I was, I'm not a big baseball guy, but I did see there was this one clip that kind of popped up where, so this one like Mariners fan he was very like visibly emotional in the crowd in Seattle because just I don't know the history of most of these baseball teams except for maybe the Giants, but they hadn't won or been in the playoffs since like 2001. So I think that's like what, during like Suzuki Ichiro's time, like that's the only thing I can really reference. So that's 20 plus years of not having any postseason success or any postseason appearances is tough. So getting that, just seeing this fan who's just been probably waiting for most of his life to see any semblance of success was like, no, I mean, you kind of feel that, right? Like it's such I don't know. I've been fortunate, obviously, being a Warriors fan and everything, that the team succeeded like relatively earlier on than I kind of expected. Like I started watching the Warriors like religiously in like 2009, when Steph Curry got drafted and everything, and they were bad for like a few years, and it was tough, especially when you're younger. So it's like it's hard for me to even imagine when you're like a younger sports fan of like a bad team, just waiting for them to finally get good after like 20 years. Like I kind of saw that there are like other instances of this that I've seen in recent kind of memory where it's like, the fan base finally gets to experience some type of success after decades of not seeing anything. I think for basketball, that's like the Kings back in like 2023. That's the Pistons of last year, who haven't had any playoff appearances for what feels like a decade or something. And then you got the Detroit Lions of these past couple of seasons, I think. I talked about them last year and about how, just kind of the resurgence that they've had. But it's such and I think I might be kind of reiterating some of the things that I had talked about last year after seeing, kind of the Lions' success. But it is kind of wild how much sports fandom really kind of just like, there's just such like an emotional tie. It brings people together more than literally anything, honestly. Like you just got an entire kind of city, backing you more. It's just like it's so interesting to me. I don't know, like there is nothing like sports in that regard. Like I really cannot think of another instance of something bringing people together other than maybe not even, well, I can't even really say politics, because like that's just so, especially here in the States, it's just such a different thing. I did watch, there was this one like YouTube short or just like YouTube video that popped up that was talking about how politics is kind of equating to sports, but I feel I don't know how, you can make some comparisons of like, oh, certain, you're willing to kind of vote in for people regardless of their policies because you are so in line with your party or whatever. But I just don't know how much more you can kind of build off of that analogy, because like if you dig too deep, it's kind of like, you can kind of like, I don't know. I think with sports fandom, you can kind of remove yourself a little bit. With politics, is a little difficult more so to do that. I don't know. It was just something to think about. But really, going back to it, it is so hard to even find another comparison from sports, like just the, I don't know, just kind of the euphoria and like the disappointment that comes with losing a game. I think last year, the example of this was seeing, New York fans going absolutely crazy after beating Boston, and going to the Eastern Conference Finals, and they're just out in the streets and they're celebrating as if they won the championship, right? Like it's just like a different level to it, in terms of bringing people together. It's just there is no. I really cannot think of another comparison in terms of media, in terms of organization. Like there's just nothing else in terms of comparison that I can think of that like is just such this like surge of unity, like sports. You know what I mean? It's so. I just find that I continue to find that fascinating. I think that there is something about sports fandom that just is just like, I don't know, that just sort of hits people in a different way, right? I think there is just so much more of this like uniform sense of togetherness, that I don't know. It's like it, and I think here's like another thing too that I've been thinking about of, I really can't think of like another example necessarily. I think the closest other thing is like maybe like music fandom, for like an example, like Taylor Swift, right? I think when you're like a mega star like her, you're going to have, fans that kind of, that are going to come out in droves. But even then there are various fractions of that fandom, right? Like you got casual fans, you got, hardcore fans and that kind of thing. But there are like divisions within that, I think, right? There are divisions in the way in which fans sort of operate, the way in which, fans kind of interpret the music. I think with sports, it's so much more unifying because like the end goal is just to win. You know what I mean? That like it's win or lose, right? I think that's kind of the thing with music. It's so much more subjective in terms of, oh, what was your favorite song off the album and that kind of thing, right? I also think this is another observation. I don't know how heavily tied they are together, but it is so interesting to kind of, see and hear about reactions to sports events or to certain music and that kind of thing, right? How certain, Taylor Swift fans might be just like overwhelmingly just, emotional over one of her songs, in the similar way to like how, that Seattle Mariners fan was just so emotional after finally getting a win after 20 years or something like that. You know what I mean? So there's just like how people react and how people kind of divulge or sort of, I don't know, just sort of express themselves and that kind of thing. I think just kind of varies in a lot of instances, but there is like this core element where you feel something, you feel like you're a part of something. And so maybe that's kind of the thing that sort of brings people together to something. You know what I mean? It creates some kind of community, even if it is fractured in some instances, right? So I don't know. It's just kind of interesting. I think it's sort of I don't know. There's another thing too, where if you're in a position such as like that the Seattle Mariners fan, where you haven't experienced that type of success, there is kind of this sense of you're like overcoming something too, like you're overcoming this, like, even though it has nothing to do with your own volition, it wasn't something that you yourself did, you're just a fan, you're just observing this team, right? You're just kind of like, you're not making the decisions, you're not like team management, you're not a general manager of a team, you're not a player, you're not the coach, like you're just you're cheering on a team. Like the players don't probably have no idea who you are, but there still is this feeling, because the name that's attached to the city and the fact that you had there is just this history attached to it. Your history is kind of attached to it, that you feel like you kind of overcame something, even though you personally didn't do anything, right? I'm not saying, this is not me downplaying any of that. It is not me downplaying any emotion or whatever, because I absolutely know what it feels like to finally win something. But I just think it's so, again, there is just something about sports that cannot be replicated in other areas. I really believe that, you know what I mean? Like music maybe is just, in terms of like an emotional reaction, like music absolutely hits in a certain way, but in terms of like bringing people together like that, there's nothing like sports, I don't think. I don't know, there's just something, there's something about it. There's something special about it. There's some kind of psychological thing with sports that I still feel like I can't really put my finger on as to like why there is just kind of this like fascination, this like fascination and obsession with certain teams, how, like, what makes you a fan of something, right? Like, is it like is there a tie to it? Maybe your parents were a fan of a team and that you sort of are carrying that on. Do you just happen to be kind of born near the proximity of where a team plays? In my case, and you just were like, yeah, why not? Let's just be a fan of this team. There's just a lot of instances where this happens, but there is just kind of this universal feeling of whenever your team wins, there is just nothing like it. It just kind of is uniting a city or a place together in a way, right? Philadelphia, when they won the Super Bowl, like they were just like, just celebrating in the streets. Like, it's just, I don't know. I think, I just think it's so interesting just continuing to see kind of examples of that. I mean, and we love to see kind of like an underdog story too, right? Like, I was rooting for the Pistons last year because, like, I know how bad they've had it over the course of the last few seasons. And, the season prior where they had the worst losing streak in NBA history, losing 28 games in a row, right? And just the absolute depths and the pits of just the worst kind of sports, the worst sports has ever seen, really. And then coming out of that and getting to the playoffs after years of not being there, having a star in Cade Cunningham, pushing the Knicks to a really competitive 6-game series, who later went on to go to the Eastern Conference Finals. Like, that is not a small feat, right? I think there is just so much to take away from that. So, like, coming out of the depths and finally getting even some semblance of success, I think is huge. And those are like the stories that we like to hear. Like, even if I'm not a direct fan of the Pistons, I like to see that for the fans of, the fans of the team, in a similar way to kind of seeing the Lions finally, be like a very successful team over the past few seasons. I think it's just something about it. And now you're seeing, I don't know, there's just like this era of success for Detroit sports, right? I think, that you got like the Tigers now in the MLB playoffs. Just like, and it just, I don't know, there's just, I'm sure Detroit is kind of having this like resurgence of sorts, right? Like, I've read some articles, a while back talking about, just like businesses just having, just more like tourism and just like, I don't know, there's just more activity in like the downtown area. Like there's like a tangible effect of sports teams having success leading to some moral kind of growth and just this sense of, I don't know, being able to kind of root for something. I don't know. There's something there. And yeah, I can't, there's a lot to it. I'm sure there's articles and stuff written about this subject of like what sports are and why they are kind of so impactful in so many sectors, and what it is like psychologically that kind of helps like build some type of camaraderie among people. But you just see examples of it over and over again of, teams that haven't been good, and you find them finally having some kind of success, and just this sort of like feeling of I don't know, just sort of optimism and positivity about something. You know what I mean? So I don't know. That's just something that I've been kind of thinking about as as I kind of see teams that haven't had success have some success, and just kind of the energy. Like you just hear like, oh, the energy of the city is like so different from a lot of different, sectors and that kind of thing. So anyways, that's my little spiel. I'll talk about, if there's any more preseason games that I catch. I know the Warriors game, I think the Warriors play in like a few days or something like that. So I'll, if anything interesting pops up there, I'll talk about that. But yeah, just basketball, again, right around the corner. In a couple of weeks, we got some, actual regular season hoops. So I'm excited for that. And yeah, so if anything else comes to mind, I'll talk about that. Soon. Alrighty, recording this on Thursday, October 9th. It is a nice little afternoon after some cloudy skies, a little overcast today. Got a nice breeze going. I think we're officially in fall. There's been like a few warmer days over the last week or so, but overall, as we do get into like the evening and that kind of thing, it does drop in temperature a bit, which is nice. I kind of like where it's currently at. Could be a little cooler during the day, but honestly, I'm fine with as is. And again, with the fall, we got all the sports and everything. More preseason games, which I'll get into in a little bit. But yeah, it's a nice time of the year, in my opinion. I do consider it to be one of my favorites. It just, I feel like I haven't really enjoyed it as much as I've wanted to over the past few years, because I do consider like fall autumn to be one of my favorite seasons. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's just been whether it's adjusting to life and just, whatever responsibilities that you might have that might, that you might be thinking about, that might be affecting you and that kind of thing. Oftentimes it can be hard to enjoy the things that you hold important, even if it is minor. So I don't know. That's just kind of where my headspace is for this season. there's a bit of a cliche when it comes to the leaves turning and the leaves also falling, and just the general change of seasons. I think you get much more of that sense during this time than really any other time of the year, I think. Just across the board, you know what I mean? As things get kind of cooler, and as just kind of like, just looking at the natural world, there's a lot more changes that occur in animal behavior and that kind of thing. So, as you know, I think there is something to be said about a type of a change that does occur with both the seasonal change and both potentially, like a life change of sorts, or whatever that might be, you know what I mean? So that's kind of where my sort of headspace is at. I'm trying to kind of think about what the next thing is going to be, what I'm kind of looking forward to, and everything like that. I think I sort of try not to, delve into too much on here. I think I've sort of, maybe stepped away from that a little bit, as I've kind of continued to focus on, my particular interests of like sports and video games and that kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know, maybe it's something where I do want to share maybe some additional stuff in the future, you know what I mean? But we'll see kind of how that goes. But just wanted to give a little insight into kind of where my headspace is at and what I'm kind of looking forward to and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's how I'm feeling at the moment. So yeah, let's talk more preseason. Yesterday was a pretty, we had like a pretty sizable amount of games going on. Warriors did play later at night, and so I was able to catch, a decent chunk of that. Well, actually, I wasn't able to watch like a good amount of it because there was a crazy comeback at the end of the fourth, where the third stringers, the third stringers, like they put up like 50 points in the fourth, which is crazy. That felt pretty unprecedented. I didn't get to watch the whole game, but I did see like parts of the first half where they were like down by a significant amount, and I was like, all right, I'm just going to kind of write this off and move on. But then I saw like the score kind of getting close, and I tuned into like maybe like the last minute of the game. My takeaways, I don't really have like a lot necessarily. I'll start with kind of the things that did stick out to me in terms of like maybe some concerns when it comes to particular opponents and that kind of thing. I would say so they were playing Portland, and, Portland is kind of moving in that direction of, having, building kind of this like younger roster and building a very defensive minded team, which very much the personnel kind of fits that bill. But I think they're sort of like the archetype of a team that concerns me when the Warriors played them during like the regular season, right? Where just the length, the athleticism, and just the overall kind of size and youth of that team and that type of team is one of like the things, one of the deterrents that I think the Warriors will face during the regular season. And it's nothing new. I think the Warriors can find counters to that, absolutely, just by being the older, wiser team and being smarter in a lot of ways. But if you're just playing with just pure athleticism and youth and that kind of thing, that is a bit of a concern, right? I think that's something the Warriors do lack in a lot of instances. They have their younger players, but it's just not, they don't have necessarily the athleticism. If you look at players like, Pajemski or Quentin Post, even Moody, he's maybe a bit more agile, but like you're not going to tout them as these athletic, in comparison to the rest of the NBA landscape. You're not going to tout them as these like, very athletic players, right? They're more they're system players, like a lot of other players on the Warriors roster, right? So when they're facing up against someone like a Shaedon Sharpe or Toumani Camara, like these are difficult covers for them because of just what they're able to do on the on the offensive side of the ball and on the defensive side, especially in the case of Camara. So that's kind of, I think there were some instances where I saw where it's just like there was just a clear athletic gap between the two teams, and I think that's where like their sort of key rotational pieces were definitely taking advantage of that. And I also completely forgot that like Drew Holiday was on this team. Like I was like, I was seeing, and I think he changed up his like hair a bit. So I was like, who is that? And I was like, oh shit, that's Drew. I just kind of forgot that he was on this team, which kind of adds on to their, defensive identity. I think if he fits very well into that. So I think Scoot Henderson is currently out for a little while. Like, honestly, I think that might be a bit of a plus for them having Holiday in the lineup. So yeah, I think they'll be a pretty they're gonna be a tough team. I don't know if they're gonna be like the best team because like they don't necessarily have maybe the strongest offensive threats. Although you could point out players like Denny Avdia. Again, Shaedon Sharpe is maybe this is like a, maybe this is kind of like a potential jump for him this year. But yeah, I mean, like defensively, like that's they're going to be a tough cover. Again, teams like this, OKC, although the Warriors did play OKC pretty well during the regular season last year. So maybe there are some things they can adjust for going into just the regular season. But yeah, I mean, those are concerns. Those are always going to be concerns with this team, and I think we got a good sense of that. Now, I didn't see like the comeback. Honestly, I don't really know what to really take away from it because it's just like you got third stringers playing against third stringers, and sometimes those things happen. And it happens to be, I think, that the third string players for the Warriors, Quentin Post, honestly, you can probably put and slot in as a secondary backup center position. You got more experience with them, like a Pat Spencer, Quentin Post, those kinds of things, who have had the time to build up more chemistry over the past couple of seasons, as opposed to like the Portland third string. I don't even know who's on that, right? I don't even know who the players were really. So I think that probably gave a bit of an advantage there. So, but it's good to see. It's good to see some wins. I don't know really how much preseason carries forward into the regular season. Someone's going to have to do the stats of, how much viability it is seeing these kinds of performances, because a lot of the time, players that do get a decent chunk of time, playing time during the preseason, don't see the floor at all during the regular season. So it's a little hard to like take away and see things that might translate, but it is nice to see some momentum going before like opening night, right? I think just getting these kinds of wins, moral victories of sorts, I think does help with some I don't know, some team building, if you want to call it that, some just morale. I think is probably going to be relatively useful, especially in the case of those younger players that are trying to build some confidence. I think that can be potentially useful. Again, I don't have the data to back that up to see whether really if that translates, but it's good to see wins. I think it's good to see a win regardless of whether it counts or not. I think there's some, I really couldn't watch a lot of it. I saw some bits and pieces of some performances. It sounds like, someone like Will Richard kind of slots in really nicely. Like, I think he continues to be exactly the type of player that they wanted, in the draft. Kuminga had some nice moments as well. I did see like some clips of him making some mistakes on some like inbounds and stuff, but honestly, I think, you're going to be some like nitpicks here and there. And I think overall he has continued to show that he might be a useful player, in their rotation if he is able to kind of commit and maintain that, as the season continues. But I've liked what I've seen from him. Right, we're sort of like cautiously optimistic for what this outcome will be. Again, it's really just a benefit to everyone if he performs well. It's a benefit for himself because he, maintains a rotation piece. And if he happens to get traded, he will find himself in a position. He's already got the contract, right? Now the contract is on another team's books. So financially, he doesn't have anything to worry about. And if he gets traded, he might find himself in a position to be more of a contributor than he is with the Warriors. So it just is it's going to be beneficial for just all parties involved if he performs well, right? So it's going to be on him. It's going to be on him. I mean, sure, you could argue like rotation wise, it's gonna you could put some of the weight on Steve Kerr, absolutely, but he's only going to get playing time based on his performance and how well he's able to contribute. So it's going to be on him. Like the ball is in his hands, right? And how he decides to perform is going to be up to him. So just going to be just keeping a watch on that. Like it's going to be Kuminga watch basically up until like the trade deadline. And then we'll see how things shake up. But yeah, good to see another win. Again, nothing super substantial to really take away other than like a crazy 50-point quarter. But again, it's how much can you really take away from that? So there's some more, obviously we continue going into the preseason and just kind of how things are like shaking up and that kind of thing. I am interested. So I've talked earlier in the season about teams that I might be interested in watching, and I kind of listed those. I'll talk a little bit about some players that I might be interested in watching. Kuminga watch, right? But let's talk about some team players on some other teams as well. Because I think that, one of the things, there's like a number of reasons why I watch a particular team, right? I tend to really enjoy just watching, as I've noted, I've tended to just enjoy watching games in general. And I'm happy to watch like whatever, most of the time, whatever's on, like depending on like the matchup, and, there might be a watchability factor there. Like, for example, Brooklyn might be a bit tough to watch, but they got like a weird situation going where they got like 1 million point guards and Michael Porter Jr. and Cam Thomas and stuff. So that's like, I don't like, how is that even going to work out? We'll see. Is Jordi Fernandez going to be able to like do anything with that roster? That kind of sounds fascinating. But a big reason is to being curious in terms of like the player. And one of the players that comes to mind is Mataz Buzelis, playing for the Chicago Bulls. He had some like moments. He had some like flashes in like the regular season. Like he has the clear kind of athleticism to be able to back him up. I think he developed some offensive skills going into this season. He had some moments during like summer league and that kind of thing. And he had some really fun moments, and I'm fascinated to see kind of how he performs, because like out of everything from the Bulls, he's probably kind of the one maybe bright spot. Like maybe you could argue like Giddey's going to have some, he just got his contract extension, and it sounds like they're trying to prioritize him as being like a big part of the future for them. They traded Caruso for him, which I think a lot of people, including myself, thought was a bad trade for the Bulls. I mean, the Bulls just make bad trades in general, but there is the potential that this might work out for them long term if he does turn into a potential, I don't know, some part of their franchise. I don't know what the rest of their future looks like, because just their management is so poor at managing their players and their assets. But he did have he also had some great moments during towards like the end of the regular season. So it's like, okay, maybe there might be some excitement there. But I think Buzelis is like the guy to keep an eye on for the Bulls. Really kind of the youth of that team and what could potentially be if it's like he does look really good. I think especially in the Eastern Conference, he could really make a name for himself. Like is there the potential for like a playoff push maybe? I don't know if he's going to quite get there this season. He's still so young, but I think that isn't a improbable possibility in the future. Like, I think that if he is able to kind of use his skill set and use his athleticism and everything like that, he's going to be a good player. I think he already is like a solid player, and he's talked about wanting to become like most improved player, which is like a kind of a funny, kind of like a funny jump, but it is like a goal to, I guess, to strive for. I mean, I think it is kind of interesting to hear that, because it's like a lot of other players are always striving for like the biggest possible. It's like, oh, I'm gonna be like the best player in the league, like there's kind of like inflated confidence from a lot of players, but he seems to have like more of like reasonable expectations, which I think is kind of funny. But yeah, I'm excited to kind of see how he performs this season, because I think he is like the one real bright spot for the Bulls. They also drafted this French player Noah Essenge. I just don't know what to expect. He's only like 19. It's like it's there's a lot to really, I don't know. I think it's a lot to expect. Someone so young to perform immediately. And considering I think the way in which they like acquired him was he was like in the middle of like almost like a championship game in the French league, and he left that to get to go drafted, which is like, I don't know, I think I'm sure like that team in particular was probably pissed about that, but I don't know, it's just sort of an interesting situation, and it's hard to kind of tell what kind of player he's going to be. But yeah, you can't really bank on him being like a huge part of this next season. This is definitely going to be like a developmental period for him. So I think, yeah, it's going to be Matas. Is it Matas? Matas Buzelis, and his performance is, I think, going to be what I'm going to be looking for this season for the Bulls. That'll be like one of the reasons to watch the Bulls for me. Another player. This one is less about like potential and, oh, what is he going to look like? And he's still young, but he's not necessarily that young anymore. It's Zion. There is just this you're just like, he is the embodiment of of just kind of like blinded hope, or whatever the term might be. You know what I mean? Where it's like, you just continue to fall for it. And I mean, I think the season in which he played like 60 plus games or 70 games or something like that is the idea that we're sort of holding on to until he got injured in like that play-in game against the Lakers. Like that was so disappointing, because I really do think that Pelicans team, if Zion was healthy, could have been interesting against OKC in that season a couple years ago, right? And I think the fact that there was kind of just there's just such a continuous thread about his health and everything like that, to the point where I was just so, I don't care about the narrative as much anymore. I don't care about any of that. The thing is just like seeing him on the court is the conviction that I need to see in order to like believe in his ability to perform, right? I don't think the Pelicans are going to be good. Their management has just done an absolute just disgusting job this past offseason with the trades and everything, right? Trading an unprotected first for Derek Queen, all that stuff. But Zion is kind of still that hope, I think. And again, it's less about the whole, his words and him being like, this is the best shape that I've felt since like high school, college, whatever. And it's more just the product on the court. I saw some moments during the couple of the preseason games they had in Australia. He looked great. He looked like Zion, right? And it's just this desire to want to see him play because he is just one of a kind. There is really no one else like him in the same way that there's like no one else like Wemby. Like these two kind of generational talents, you want to see them play, right? I'm not like a Pelicans fan. I'm not a Spurs fan, but you want to see those particular players play regardless of the teams that they're on. And I just want to see Zion be on the court, right? I don't care too much about the team's success, but if he's able to play, if he's able to play for a decent amount of the regular season, I think that would be great, right? Nobody's expecting this Pelicans team to be good, and especially in the West, but anytime, any team that goes against them and Zion is playing, there is kind of this, they have to adjust because he has such a pull, he has such a gravity to him with his play that I think that you just can't ignore him, right? And he's just such an exciting player. When they were making their runs, when they were kind of relatively healthy, like they were such a fun team. Pelicans were kind of like this almost dark horse team, with Ingram and healthy Herb Jones and Trey Murphy. Like they had like a good team. It's just the health, right? Ingram was injured. Zion was injured. I mean, last year was just kind of an absolute nightmare in terms of everybody getting injured, including DeJounte Murray. Like, it's just like, they had the worst injury luck out of any team last season, right? And so it's really kind of just the issue of like New Orleans and kind of this cloud that it hangs over that franchise, as opposed to like Zion himself necessarily. I think because his association is with the Pelicans, that almost kind of drags his value and his sort of potential down, because the franchise and the team has not shown historically that they are really anything. And that's just what's unfortunate, right? Like, you've just heard stories like Tony Allen. There was like a clip like maybe like a year ago or earlier this year about like him just joking about just the Pelicans just being like the worst franchise in the league, and the fact that they were like eating the scraps off of the Saints, the Saints like food and stuff. It's like in jest. But there have been other reports regarding how their facilities aren't as well kept, and their training facilities are just not as high quality as the rest of the league. So it's just there's always something there, which is really unfortunate. It just comes down to ownership and their lack of wanting to maybe fund the team and that kind of thing, right? So it's unfortunate how much influence that has, and how much influence like money has in just anything, right? But I really just I just hope that doesn't really infect and continue to infect Zion as a player, because I really do think that he can be great. He could be great. Like, maybe it's not with the Pelicans, which I think a lot of people have talked about. I mean, it seems like, New Orleans is probably going to want to try to hold on to him, considering what their quote-unquote vision is from Joe Dumars. But I want to see that, right? I really want to see him succeed at some level. Obviously, the team will kind of matter where he's performing, but it would be nice to see him play, right? I mean, I was, one of the best stories to come out of last year was Lonzo Ball finally being able to perform after getting like surgically, just like surgical knees, basically just, modified knees, and kind of being able to perform on that. Like that was just kind of a huge story, because like he was out of, you hadn't played in for like 3 seasons or something like that, right? So, seeing players come back from those types of injuries and being able to perform is always kind of like a feel good story. And I think in Zion's case, it's not as much about the, there's less of this, I think with Zion or Lonzo Ball's case, he had issues just with his legs and everything, and you can maybe point to, like, I don't know, maybe it was just because of how much stress he put on them earlier in life and everything like that, or it's a potential genetic thing. I don't know, but I think in Zion's case, like, it's a lot about his ability to stay on the floor because of the weight and his fitness and that kind of thing, right? Like, I think that's a lot more evident. Again, I don't want to go into the freaking narratives of these kinds of things, because I think they're so drawn out and just so tiring. But there is something to that where I think you can ultimately change the direction of your career if you take care of yourself, right? Sometimes they're just freak injuries, and there's a lot of that, right? Like, sometimes injuries just completely derail a player's career, and it has nothing to do, like, there wasn't anything in particular that they did that affected them. Like, they did all the right things, but just, I don't know, something bad happened, right? But I think in Zion's case, like, he can do stuff about it. Like, he can take care of himself better. Like, we can see, we've seen the clips. Like, he's able to, he can perform. It's just a matter of, I don't know. It's just a matter of, like, just maintaining and just staying focused and all that kind of stuff, right? I think that there is something to that. So yeah, I want to see Zion play. I think that's going to be the one thing, right? I'm not going to put my whole stock into it, but I do have some hope, because I think that it's exciting whenever you do see Zion, and it gives me like another reason to watch the Pelicans, even though I'm not like, I don't know, it's like JP, Jordan Poole, Looney. You're not like watching. It's like I'm watching because of their former Warriors, but I'm not like watching them because like they're like the most exciting. I mean, Poole does some silly stuff, but you're there for Zion, right? And I think that's kind of the hope that that you're sort of holding on to with him. One more player that I'm kind of excited to kind of see. I think with this player, one of the things that sort of stands out to me is whether they're going to be able to kind of ascend to another level. Like I talked about Matas Buzelis and his growth, but he's still such a young player that I think, the potential for him is kind of, you can kind of imagine like a lot of things with him, because he's not a fully realized player yet. But in this case, like, you have a player who has already shown to be a really good player, but they just kind of made their announcement, if you want to call it that, last season, and I think that's Cade. Whenever I watched like the Pistons play last season, I was like one of the people that one of the people, as if I'm laying my freaking claim to it. No, I was kind of predicting that they would make a bit of a leap last year, because, like, honestly, where else could they go but up? They were one of the worst teams in NBA history, all that kind of stuff. And I do remember just like, I was watching that 28 game losing streak. Was it 27, 20? I think it's 28 game losing streak, because I was just like so fascinated. I was just like watching. I'm like, this team is like not that bad. Like, they're bad, of course, because they're still all young and stuff, but like Cade is a good player. Like you could absolutely see that Cade was good. He was trying to like carry this team to victory, and they were just kept losing game after game after game. And I can't even imagine what that does to someone just experiencing that type of loss over and over again. And I think just coming out of that and being the success story that they were last season, I think is huge. And yeah, I mean, like he just was, just kind of showcased in a lot of instances. He got his first kind of all-star, he got his first like all-star appearance and everything like that. They made the playoffs. I talked about this recently, and their how they performed against the Knicks, and how well they stood up against them. But I think just like that turnaround for Detroit and for Cade last year, it was such a huge development, where I think like he sort of maintained like the type of play that he had from that awful season, but now they were winning, and he was a huge factor in that. Right now for this season, because they've lost some veterans, and I do think that they probably won't be as good this season as last year, because they lost some key players in Dennis Schroeder, Tim Hardaway Jr., Malik Beasley, who were huge factors in the way in which they were able to perform. Now I think there is going to be a little bit more added pressure on Cade, because I remember like towards like the end of the season, Cade did miss some games, and they were perfectly fine having Schroeder be the point, being like the starting point guard and everything, and they still played pretty well. But I think now there's going to be a bit more of that weight shifted and responsibility shifted back to Cade. One of the biggest weaknesses he had was his turnovers, and he had some kind of sloppy playmaking moments here and there. Is he going to be able to kind of improve that and keep the turnovers low? Because I think he has the ability to be an incredible playmaker and an incredible shot taker and everything. And he had some great moments. He had some like game winners and stuff like that. But it's just going to be a matter of like, can he hold on to the ball? Can he keep like some level of ball? I was going to say job security. Is he going to have some level of ball security so that they can maintain possession and they can get a decent shot up in within the half court setting? Like I think that is sort of like the thing to keep an eye on for my personal opinion. And are they going to be able to kind of keep that? Or is he going to take an additional leap from where he currently is? Because he has shown to be a really good and even potentially great player, but is he going to be able to make an even bigger leap this season, right? And again, it's just like within the context and the scope of the Eastern Conference, there isn't a reason there. There's a lot of ways in which the Pistons can take advantage of that, but I do think that there is going to be, because of this additional responsibility that's placed on him, he might not meet those expectations, right? And the Pistons might falter a little bit, because I do kind of believe that. I do think that, they lost some really strong key pieces from last season, and they brought in I think they brought in Duncan Robinson, and then some other players as well, Karis LeVert, who's solid. But are they going to be able to replace the production that those other veterans had last season, I think is the question. And will Cade be able to kind of effectively prop himself up and prop his teammates up to be to get like another winning season? I don't know. We'll see. I think it's going to be like they really could take advantage and be like one of the better teams in the league, or sorry, not in the league, but in the Eastern Conference, because they do have continuity as opposed to a lot of other teams who had some major shakeups, including like the Hawks bringing in Porzingis and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, although I think that fit works out pretty well for them. And then you got the Magic bringing in Desmond Bane. But I guess you could argue they have a good amount of continuity as well. So, but it's like, yeah, I mean, you got another year with Cade, and then you got, Jaden Ivey coming back. Is he going to be a significant piece as well? But I do think that Cade is going to be the guy to watch. But I guess you could also add Ivy into that conversation as well, because he had some really strong moments earlier in the season before he got injured, and the whole Cole Anthony thing, which I thought was BS. Like, I thought that was such a reckless play by Anthony. I remember watching that. I'm like, dude, what are you, like, that is just so stupid. It was just such a brain dead play to make. And I think Ivy will be exciting to see as well, because he had some cool moments, and maybe he'll be able to replicate some of that this season. So that, I guess, that kind of tandem would be something to watch for. But yeah, just some players to kind of keep an eye on for myself, and I guess teams, if you sort of teams in relation to that. As we get closer to the season, as I kind of watch some more preseason games and some more teams play, I think I'll be able to kind of gauge some additional thoughts. So I'll get into that as I kind of progress and make my way through. But I'm excited to kind of talk about more basketball. We're really in it. I think the next Warriors game is this Friday, which is tomorrow. Are they playing tomorrow? Maybe not. I need to double check. But they're playing, I think, the Lakers or something again, which is like, all right, whatever. I want to see another team, right? Like, we're going to see the Lakers 4 times this season. Let's see like an Eastern Conference team or something like that. But I get it. It's preseason. It's not that big of a deal. Anyways, that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for listening as always. This has been Save the Semantics. Signing off.